Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates. Hello everybody, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we shall be analyzing the Hindu newspaper dated 22nd of Jan 2021 of the New Delhi edition. The topics to be discussed today has been presented on your screen. Timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. See, in today's editorial page, there are two important articles. One article is related to defending liberty against political prosecution, and the second article is about are the courts encroaching upon the powers of the executive. Now, these two articles have been recently been covered in our DNS. Hence, we shall not be covering these articles once again. The link to these DNS articles are provided in the description box below. Let us begin our analysis with the first article. Now, this particular article appears on page number 10. The article is titled as Some Defense Imports Inevitable, Army Chief. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS paper 2, both from the perspective of Indian economy as well as internal security. If you have a look at the present status of defense manufacturing in case of India, in the year 2019-20, the total size of the defense industry was around rupees 80,000 crores. 80% of the defense manufacturing was contributed by the public sector entities, and the remaining 20% was contributed by the private sector entity. In spite of the fact that the defense manufacturing has grown by rapid strides, India, even today, is one of the major importer of defense goods. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, India is the second largest arms importer, accounting for almost around 10% of the import of the global arms. Almost 65 to 70% of the defense goods which are used in India are basically imported. See, India aspires to become a global superpower, and we have to realize that we cannot become a superpower by importing the defense goods. We have to become a net exporter of defense goods, and we have to ensure self-reliance. Accordingly, recently in August 2020, the Government of India has come up with a Defense Production and Export Promotion Policy 2020. The idea behind this particular policy is to reduce the import of defense goods, ensure the self-reliance. The target under this particular policy is to ensure the turnover of $25 billion in the defense manufacturing by the end of 2025, out of which we should be in a position to export the defense goods worth at least $5 billion. Now, this particular article highlights that recently, while delivering a speech before the Confederation of Indian Industry, the Army Chief has highlighted that India has lagged behind other countries in undertaking the defense modernization. Accordingly, from the perspective of the UPSC prelims as well as mains examination, you should understand various aspects such as the defense production and export promotion policy, the various steps taken by the government to boost the indigenization of the defense industry, the constraints and challenges in boosting the defense manufacturing, and what strategies should be adopted. Accordingly, based upon our discussion, a mains question for your practice here could be: discuss various steps taken by the government to ensure the indigenization of the defense manufacturing in India. Also highlight various constraints and challenges in ensuring Atmanirbhar Bharat in the defense manufacturing. So firstly, coming to the steps taken by the Government of India to ensure the self-reliance in the defense manufacturing. First and foremost, prior to the year 2001, the defense manufacturing was reserved only for the public sector. The private sector was not allowed in the defense manufacturing. However, post 2001, the defense manufacturing has now been de-reserved and it has been opened up for the private sector entity. Secondly, now the Government of India has adopted the liberalized FDI regime where FDI up to 74% is allowed under the automatic route and FDI is allowed up to 100% under the government route. Please do note that the FDI cap under the automatic route was initially 49%, but recently in May 2020, as part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat package, this limit has been enhanced to 74%. The third aspect is related to the defense offset policy. See, defense offset policy was introduced way back in the year 2005. This was introduced as part of the defense procurement policy and procedure. This policy was adopted based upon the recommendations of the Vijay Kelkar committee. So what exactly is the defense offset policy? See, whenever the Indian government signs a defense contract with a foreign company, usually such defense contracts have the offset clause. Under such an offset clause, the foreign company would be required to make certain amount of investment in India. This particular investment which is required to be done by the foreign company is in turn defined in terms of percentage of the defense deal. Presently, it is 30% of the defense deal. Now, for example, let's say the Indian government is purchasing fighter jets from US-based company. The defense deal is worth rupees 1000 crores. Accordingly, such a foreign company would be required to invest minimum 300 crores in the Indian economy. Now, this particular offset clause can be fulfilled by the foreign company in a number of ways. First and foremost, it can directly purchase some products from the Indian companies. It can enter into a joint venture with the Indian companies, and it can establish its base in India through the foreign direct investment. It can also go for the technology transfer or the transfer of equipment to the Indian companies. So through a number of ways and means, a foreign company can fulfill its offset obligations. Please do note that recently changes have been made with respect to the offset obligations. Earlier, the offset clause was applicable to all the defense deals whose value was more than rupees 300 crores. But recently, as part of the Defense Acquisition Procedure 2020, now the offset clause would be applicable to all the defense deals of more than rupees 1000 crores. In other words, if the value of defense deal is less than rupees 2000 crore, then the offset clause will not be applicable. So what advantages the offset clause basically has for the Indian economy? So basically through the offset clause, we are forcing the foreign company to make an investment in the defense manufacturing in India and thus ensure the self-reliance and reduce the import of the defense goods. The next aspect is the Defense Procurement Procedure 2020. As the name suggests, this particular procedure lays down as to what priority the government should follow while procuring the defense goods from the Indian companies and the foreign companies. Obviously, while procuring the defense goods, we would have to give higher priority to the Indian companies over and above the foreign companies. Secondly, we would have to give higher priority to the goods which are indigenously designed, developed and manufactured in India in comparison to the defense goods which are designed and developed in the other countries. Accordingly, if you see, the highest priority has been given to buy Indian, which is indigenously designed, developed and manufactured, which means here we are giving highest priority to the Indian vendors who have designed, developed and manufacturing the defense goods in India. The next priority is given to the Indian vendors who may not have designed or developed the defense goods in India, but these defense goods could be manufactured within the Indian economy. At the third level, we are giving priority to the Indian companies who may have entered in tie-up or a partnership with a foreign company. So through the technology transfer, these Indian companies may be manufacturing the defense goods. So as you can see clearly here, Indian government has given a clear priority to the defense goods which are indigenously designed, developed and manufactured in India. Nextly, the Indian government has imposed ban on almost around 101 defense items which also include the high technology weapons. The Indian government has sought to set up two defense corridors to boost the defense manufacturing. One of the defense corridor is planned in UP and another has been planned in Tamil Nadu. Nextly, the Indian government has unveiled the strategic partnership model way back in the year 2017, The idea here is to foster the partnership between the Indian companies and the multinational corporations for boosting the manufacturing of the defense goods. Nextly, as you must be aware, India not only imports the defense goods but it also imports the components and the spare parts of these defense goods. Hence, in order to promote the indigenization of the components and spare parts used in various defense platforms, the Indian government has come up with a policy for the indigenization of components and spares in the year 2019. Last, as we discussed, is the defense production and the export promotion policy. In spite of all these steps undertaken by the government of India, even today, the defense manufacturing is saddled with a number of constraints and challenges. What exactly are these challenges? First and foremost, presently in case of India, we have almost around 41 ordnance factories which are involved in manufacturing of various defense goods. Now these ordnance factories are managed by the Ordnance Factory Board. This board works under the direct supervision of the Ministry of Defense, Department of the Defense Production. The problem faced by the Ordnance Factory Board is similar to the problem which is faced by the Ministry of Railways. Since the Ordnance Factory Board is directly managed by the Government of India, it does not has sufficient amount of functional as well as operational flexibility. The Ordnance Factory Board has not been able to perform efficiently on account of red tapeism as well as bureaucratic delays. Apart from that, there are restrictions on the ordnance factories on entering into joint venture partnership with the private sector entity. Now, this particular problem faced by the Ordnance Factory Board has recently been addressed by the Finance Minister as part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat package. The Finance Minister has announced for the corporatization of the Ordnance Factory Board. Hence, this recent step by the Government of India is in the right direction. It would give the necessary functional and operational flexibility to the management of the defense ordnance factories. Secondly, as discussed before, even though we have liberalized the defense manufacturing and we have opened up the defense manufacturing for the private sector even today accounts only for the 20% of the defense manufacturing. Almost a major chunk of defense manufacturing, that is 80%, even today it is contributed by the public sector undertakings. This is mainly on the account of the fact that the government has given higher preference to defense PSUs rather than creating a level playing field between the defense PSUs and the private sector entity. So if you don't create a level playing field for the private sector, then obviously the private sector would not be willing to come forward to make an investment in the defense manufacturing. The next problem is over the bureaucratic delays in the procurement of defense goods. Next is the failure of the defense offset policy. Now, this was recently highlighted by CAG in his report. Recently, in his report, the CAG has highlighted that usually when a government comes out with a tender for the procurement of the defense goods from the foreign multinational companies, these multinational companies willingly come forward and bid for the lowest amount. They also undertake higher offset obligations. But usually these MNCs undertake offset obligations mainly in order to get the tender rather than to make an investment in the Indian economy. Now, for example, the CAG has highlighted that even though the Indian government has bought the Rafale fighter jets from the French company Dassault Aviation Company, the Dassault Aviation has failed to fulfill its offset obligations. According to CAG report, the foreign companies had made a total offset obligations of almost around 66,000 crores. But so far, they have been able to fulfill an offset obligation of only around 11,000 crore. This clearly shows that the defense offset policy has failed to promote the defense manufacturing, and accordingly, we need to realign this particular policy. The last aspect is obviously lack of investment in research and development. See, our ability to ensure the self-reliance in defense manufacturing in turn depends upon the innovation. If we are spending less amount of money on research and development, we would not be able to ensure self-reliance. Presently, the Indian government spends hardly around 0.7% of its GDP on research and development. This is considered to be quite lower in comparison to other countries. Take for instance in case of Israel, which is considered to be one of the major exporter of defense goods, the investment in research and development is as high as around 4.2% of its GDP. So what should be done in order to address these constraints and challenges and ensure the self-reliance? See, presently the private sector entity does not have a clear picture of the future requirement of the armed forces. If the private sector entities are able to get a clear picture as to what our defense forces would need in future, accordingly the private sector entity would start undertaking investment and start producing the defense goods. Hence, in order to fulfill this particular need of the private sector entity, we have to set up the project management unit. The project management unit should clearly communicate to the private sector entity as to what are our future requirements. Nextly, so far the Indian government has focused upon the licensed production, which means basically the Indian companies rely on the license from the foreign companies to manufacture the defense goods in India. So basically we are relying on the technology transfer. Going forward, we have to move away from the licensed production to designing, developing and manufacturing our own defense goods. Nextly, just like how we have a distinct budget head for procuring the defense goods from the foreign companies, we need to have a distinct budget head for procuring the defense goods from the Indian companies. Nextly, we would have to enhance the investment in research and development and convert the prototypes into commercially useful products. Nextly, in recent times, a number of micro, small, and medium enterprises as well as startups have ventured into the defense manufacturing. So, in order to provide the necessary support to these MSMEs and startup companies, we would have to set up a separate portal. Through such portal, we would have to provide the necessary hand-holding support to MSMEs as well as the startup companies. And lastly, in order to ensure that we are able to export defense goods worth $5 billion by the end of 2025, we would have to focus more upon the government to government agreements as well as provide necessary lines of credit or funding to our neighboring countries. So these are some of the important aspects which one should know with respect to this particular article. With this, let us now take up the next article. Now this particular article appears on the editorial page number 6. The article has been titled as Getting It Wrong on India's Level of Agricultural Support. This article shall be important mainly with respect to the GS Paper 3 Indian Economy. See, before discussing this particular article in much greater detail, let us first look into its background. The Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development publishes Producer Support Estimate. The Producer Support Estimate, about which we'll be discussing later on, basically seeks to analyze the impact of government policies on the Indian agriculture. It mainly measures the extent of financial support given by the government in the form of subsidies to the farmers. Also, it measures as to what prices are received by the farmers when they sell off their agricultural commodities. Presently, in case of India, post the passage of the recent Farm Acts, a debate has been ignited with respect to the producer support estimates in the Indian economy. According to OECD, the producer support estimate has consistently been negative between the years 2001 to 2019. That is, for almost 19 years, the producer support estimate has been negative. What does this show? One, this shows that the extent of financial support given by the government to the farmers is lower. Secondly, the prices received by the farmers when they sell off their agricultural commodities is also lower. In the year 2019-20, the producer support estimate was in negative, that is minus 1.62 lakh. Accordingly, this particular article here basically discusses various flaws in the methodology adopted by OECD for the calculation of the producer support estimate. Now, the contents of this particular article is not important from the perspective of the UPSC examination. As part of UPSC examination, you are not required to understand as to what are the flaws with respect to calculation of the producer support estimate. Rather, from the perspective of both prelims as well as mains, one should have a broad understanding about what exactly is the producer support estimate, what is the value of the producer support estimate in India, and if it is negative, what are its implications, and what should be done in order to make this negative producer support estimate into positive producer support estimate. So keeping in mind the requirements of the UPSC examination, let us focus upon these aspects. So let us first understand the concept of the producer support estimate as given by OECD. See, normally in any economy, the farmers are usually supported by two sections of its citizens, that is, the taxpayers and the consumers. The money paid by the taxpayers is in turn transferred to the farmers in the form of subsidies. Obviously, this is done by the government of a particular country. So, the government provides subsidies in terms of water, free power, seeds, fertilizers, etc. And this money is based upon the tax that is paid by the taxpayers. So, in a way, there is transfer of money from the taxpayers to the farmers. This is basically done in order to support the farmers in order to undertake cultivation. Once the crops are harvested, the farmers sell off these agricultural commodities in the market. So the consumers buy these agricultural commodities and pay prices to the farmers. So once again, there is a transfer of income from the consumers to the farmers. Now, in order to estimate as to how much of money is being transferred from the consumers to the farmers, OECD has a concept of the producer support estimate. Now, the amount of support which is extended to the farmers, this would depend upon two important aspects. That is the amount of subsidies given by the government and the prices received by the farmers. Now, let us consider the first scenario. Now, let's say the total amount of subsidies given by the government is rupees 200 and the farmer in this particular case is able to get rupees 250 on selling these agricultural commodities. This clearly shows that the farmer in this particular case has been able to earn an extra rupees 50. As far as consumer is concerned, the consumer is paying rupees 250 in this particular case. So there is a net transfer of money from the consumers to the farmers. This is the first scenario. Now let us take the second scenario where the subsidies provided by the government is once again, let's say, rupees 200. But in this particular case, let's say the prices which are paid to the farmer is only rupees 150. Now what does this show here? This clearly shows that the farmers here are earning less amount of income from the subsidies given by the government of India. Ultimately, a question must arise in your mind as to who actually is getting subsidized in this particular case. You should understand here that it is not the farmer who is getting subsidized, rather it is the consumers who are getting subsidized. Here, the consumers, instead of paying at least a money which is equivalent to the subsidies, that is rupees 200, the consumers are paying rupees 50 less. So you are making available the food grains to the consumers at much lower prices, and this is in turn affecting the farmers. So the OECD's producer support estimate is calculated as the prices minus subsidies divided by the value of agricultural output into 100. Now for the sake of simplification, let's consider the value of agricultural output as rupees 100. So let's consider the first scenario. In the first scenario, the prices was equal to rupees 250 and the subsidies was rupees 200. So in the first case, the producer support estimate was 50%. Now look at the second scenario where the prices were rupees 150 and the subsidies were rupees 200. So 150 minus 200, that is minus 50. So in this particular case, the producer support estimate would be minus 50%. So what can be interpreted from the value of the producer support estimate? If the producer support estimate is positive, there would be a net transfer of income from both taxpayers as well as consumers. This is as seen in the first scenario where the producer support estimate was equal to 50%. Now, if the producer support estimate is negative, this means that there is net transfer of income from the farmers to the consumers rather than from the consumers to the farmers. So, this in a way is affecting the farmers and benefiting the consumers. Now, this particular bar graph here shows the extent of the producer support estimates across the various economies. This is for the period 2014-15 to 2016-17. As you can see, the average producer support estimate in the OECD countries is 18%. However, in case of India, this is minus 6%. This clearly shows that the amount of prices received by the farmers is quite lower. This is the first thing. Secondly, it also shows that the government's policies towards the Indian agriculture have subsidized the consumers rather than subsidizing the Indian farmers. Now, if you look at the producer support estimates in the advanced economies, particularly in countries such as Norway, Switzerland, Iceland, Korea, etc., it is around 50%. So, in case of India, it is much lower at minus 6%. So, what are the implications of the negative producer support estimate in India? First and foremost, this clearly shows that the farmers are unable to get the right price for the agriculture produce. Obviously, this is on account of various restrictions on marketing of agricultural produce as well as the outdated APMC acts. So, in a way, the recently passed farm acts are in the right direction since they would enable the farmers to get the right prices for their agricultural produce. See, secondly, the government of any country should also provide for the necessary price support to the farmers. Now, for example, in case of India, this price support is provided in the form of minimum support price. The government announces the minimum support price for almost around 22 major agricultural commodities. So, this is a kind of price support. Now, in case of India, this price support is considered to be quite lower. Why? Because the MSP, even though it is declared for 22 major agricultural commodities, the price support is strong only for rice and wheat. The amount of price support for the other agricultural commodities, particularly the commodities such as pulses, oilseeds, millets, etc., the price support for these agricultural commodities is quite lower. So, this in a way can lead to a negative producer support estimate. Lastly, as highlighted before, a negative producer support estimate would mean that the government policies are subsidizing the consumers rather than the farmers. So, what should be done here? We have to provide for the higher income support to the farmers in the form of PM Kisan. This has to be done basically in order to compensate for the transfer of income from the farmers to the consumers. Secondly, the recently passed farm acts, they are in the right direction since they would liberalize agricultural marketing and ensure the fair and remunerative prices for the agricultural commodities. And thirdly, the government of India has to focus upon export of the agricultural commodities. See, we do have to realize that the prices of some of the agricultural commodities, particularly rice and wheat, the prices of these agricultural commodities in the domestic market is quite lower. So, by exporting these agricultural commodities to the other countries, the farmers can earn higher income. So, by boosting the export of agricultural commodities, we would be able to ensure right prices for the Indian farmers. So, this is what you have to know with respect to this particular article. With this, let us now take up the next article. Now, the next article appears on page number 7. The article is titled as A Case to Dispose of Mercy Petitions Swiftly. Now, this particular article basically highlights about the delay in the communication about the decisions of commuting the death sentence of a particular death convict. Accordingly, this particular article shall be important mainly with respect to the Indian polity. As part of this particular video analysis, let us understand in detail about the clemency powers of the executive. That is, the clemency powers that have been vested with both the president as well as the governor. See, a number of Indian laws provides for the capital punishment in a form of a sentence. However, as the society has evolved over a period of time, there is a need to reduce the capital punishment for certain kind of offences. Accordingly, in a landmark case known as Bachchan Singh versus State of Punjab, the Supreme Court has ruled that capital punishment would have to be awarded in the rarest of the rare cases. Apart from that, if any of the court awards the capital punishment, the court has to explicitly state as to what are the reasons or the grounds on which the capital punishment has been awarded to a particular person. Now, once a person has been awarded with a capital punishment, such a person can file for a mercy petition either before the president, that is under Article 72, or he can file a mercy petition before the governor under Article 161. Now, the clemency powers have been vested with the executive basically in order to correct any kind of judicial errors that may have taken place in the course of prosecution, as well as to provide relief from certain sentences which the executive may consider to be a little harsh. These clemency powers of the executive include pardon, commutation, remission, respite, and reprieve. Pardon here basically removes both the sentence as well as conviction of a particular person. So, since the pardon removes both the sentence as well as conviction, such a person can then go on to lead a normal life. So, in a way, we can consider pardon as complete forgiveness given by the executive. Next is commutation. Commutation basically means substituting a harsher punishment, let's say a death penalty, by a lighter punishment. The lighter punishment here could be lifelong imprisonment. The next one is remission. Remission basically means reducing the amount of sentence without changing its basic character. That means the nature of sentence that a person is required to serve, that may remain the same. However, the time period for which he is required to serve the sentence, that may get reduced. For example, a 10 years rigorous imprisonment may be changed to 5 years rigorous imprisonment as part of the remission. Next one is respite. Respite here means awarding lesser punishment due to certain special facts. Certain special facts such as disability, pregnancy, etc. may lead to a respite where the executive can award lesser punishment. Next is reprieve. Reprieve here is a kind of temporary stay on the execution of a sentence. This is normally used with respect to death sentences. So by giving a reprieve to a convict, we are enabling a person to file for a mercy petition so that there is a temporary stay on his execution. Now, as stated before, both the president as well as governor have been vested with the pardoning powers. However, there are certain important differences in the pardoning powers of these two executives. The pardoning powers of the president have been provided under Article 72, while the pardoning powers of the governor have been provided under Article 161 of the Indian Constitution. The president can exercise the clemency powers with respect to violation of any central law, whereas the governor can exercise the clemency powers with respect to the violation of the state laws. Only the President of India can pardon a death sentence. Governor cannot pardon a death sentence. So even if a particular state law provides for capital punishment, the governor cannot pardon the death sentence. Only the President of India can pardon the death sentence. However, what is also equally important to note here is that the governor, even though he cannot pardon a death sentence, he can commute a death sentence. So with respect to commutation powers, both the president as well as governor enjoy equal powers. But you have to understand here that the governor cannot pardon a death sentence. Lastly, only the president has the clemency powers with respect to the punishment given by the military code. So the governor cannot exercise the clemency powers with respect to the punishment which are inflicted by the military code. Now, with respect to the exercise of clemency powers by the executive, that is the president and the governor, the Supreme Court of India has given a number of judgments. First and foremost, in the Maru Ram versus Union of India case, the Supreme Court has clearly highlighted that the exercise of these clemency powers by the president as well as executive, they are not discretionary powers. Rather, these powers have to be exercised based upon the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. Now, in case of president, the president exercised the clemency powers based upon the aid and advice of the Home Ministry. So ultimately, it is the Home Ministry that takes a call with respect to the clemency powers as far as union is concerned. Next, in the Shatrughan Chauhan versus of Union of India case, this is considered to be a landmark case because normally it has been seen that executive, that is both the president as well as the governor, normally take huge amount of time in disposing of the mercy petitions. Now such kind of inexplicable delays not only leads to torture, but it is considered to be a violation of Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. Hence, in order to streamline the exercise of clemency powers and to ensure the time-bound disposal of mercy petitions, in this particular case, the Supreme Court has given detailed guidelines with respect to how the mercy petitions have to be disposed. In particular, in this particular case, the Supreme Court has stated that inordinate and unexplained delay in deciding on the mercy petitions would automatically lead to commutation of the death sentences. And lastly, in the Epuru Sudhakar case, the Supreme Court has stated that during the normal course, the Supreme Court would not interfere with respect to the exercise of the clemency powers. However, if the clemency powers are exercised by the executive without application of mind, if they are considered to be malified, and if the order passed by the executive is considered to be arbitrary, then the Supreme Court would have the power to review the exercise of such clemency powers. Now, this is what you have to know with respect to this particular article. Next, on page number 9, we have a developing story. The title of the article here is China defends a new village in Arunachal Pradesh. Now, recently it has been reported in the Indian media that China has constructed a new village in the state of Arunachal Pradesh. This new village is approximately 4 kilometers inside the line of actual control. It is located in the Appan Subansiri district of Arunachal Pradesh. Now we do know that way back in 1962, India and China had fought a deadly war. The most contentious issue in the 1962 Indo-China war was over Chinese claims over the entire Arunachal Pradesh. In particular, China claimed that Arunachal Pradesh is a southern extension of Tibet. And even today, China claims that the entire Tawang tract which borders Bhutan belongs to it. Now, if you go back to the history of the village which China has constructed inside the line of actual control, the history of the construction of this village goes much before 1962. Way back in the year 1959, the Chinese army had attacked the Assam Rifles in a place known as Longju. Now, subsequent to the attack on the Indian army had withdrew from this particular place. Apart from that, it had also given up the patrolling of this particular area. Accordingly, China has seen this as an opportunity and has constructed a new village. This new village is much closer to the Longju. Now, if you want to know the exact location of the newly constructed China's village, we can have a look at the map as provided by the Survey of India. This village, as you can see here, it is located inside the line of actual control. It is located in the Upper Subansiri district. Further, through the satellite images provided by Planet Labs, which is basically from US, according to this particular satellite images, as you can see, between August 2019 to November 2020, the Chinese settlements along the line of actual control have rapidly increased. Apart from that, you should also know that this particular newly constructed village is along the banks of a river known as Sari Chu in the Upper Subansiri district of Arunachal Pradesh. Now, in response to these satellite images which have been published in the Indian media, the Ministry of External Affairs has recently acknowledged that China has indeed built a village 4 kilometers inside the line of actual control. Now we have to understand that this is a developing story. So let us wait and watch as to what would be the response of the Indian government with respect to this recent Chinese incursion inside the line of actual control. Now this particular article appears on page number 14. The article is titled as Sensex slips on profit booking after climbing past the 50,000 mark. This article shall be important from the perspective of prelims Indian economy. See, in last 1.5 years, that is from June 2019 to Jan 2021, the BSE Sensex has increased by almost 10,000 points. In last 1.5 months alone, the BSE Sensex has registered an increase of 5,000 points. Now, this particular large-scale increase in BSE Sensex, particularly when the Indian economy is facing the economic slowdown, it is considered to be little puzzling. On one hand, the Indian economy is set to register the negative GDP growth rate for the financial year 2020-21, while the BSE Sensex has been increasing by a larger value. This increase in BSE Sensex, particularly when the Indian economy is facing the slowdown, this is attributed to mainly three reasons. First and foremost, there is a higher expectations of the future economic growth, which in turn has led to a higher investment in the stock market. Secondly, the higher amount of liquidity which is infused by both the government as well as the RBI through the Atmanirbhar Bharat package. This excess liquidity has found its way into the stock market. And lastly, India has been able to attract a large amount of foreign portfolio investment, thus leading to a large scale increase in BSE Sensex. Now, this particular article highlights that the BSE Sensex has climbed to 50,000. The BSE Sensex was expected to rise even further. However, because of the profit booking, at the end of the day, the BSE Sensex has dropped to below 50,000. This decrease in BSE Sensex after rising to 50,000 points is basically attributed to the profit booking. So as far as the prelims is concerned, from the perspective of prelims, you should understand about Sensex and Nifty, profit booking and the VIX index. See, in order to measure the stock market performance, in India, we use two stock market indices. One is Sensex and the other one is Nifty. Sensex basically measures the performance of the stocks that are listed on the Bombay Stock Exchange. The Sensex tracks the performance of the top 30 shares which are listed on the BSE. So as the share prices of these top 30 shares increases, Sensex would also increase. Similarly, if there is decrease in the share prices of these top 30 shares, then the Sensex would reduce. Nifty, on the other hand, tracks the performance in the share prices which are listed on the National Stock Exchange. Unlike Sensex, which tracks the performance of top 30 shares, Nifty tracks the performance of the top 50 shares which are listed on the NSE. See, as far as profit booking is concerned, profit booking simply means that a person has resorted to sale of his shares in order to realize the appreciation in its value. Now, for example, let's say you have bought a share at rupees 10. After a certain duration of time, the price of this particular share may have increased to rupees 15, which means in a way you have realized a profit of rupees 5. Now, if you sell off this share in order to realize this profit of rupees 5, then it is referred to as profit booking, which means you are basically booking your profit by selling of the shares. Now, just imagine if all the individuals who have bought the shares of a particular company, if all such individuals simultaneously decide to sell off the shares, in that case, the share prices which were increasing initially, they would later on reduce. Hence, profit booking by multiple investors simultaneously, this would lead to decline in the value of shares. See, as far as what has happened yesterday was, suddenly the share prices started increasing. So all the investors wanted to book their profits. So they decided to sell off the shares. Now, if all the investors simultaneously decide to sell off the shares, obviously, by a certain amount, the share price would reduce. This is what has happened precisely in the stock market yesterday. The Sensex, which had initially increased to 50,000 points and it was expected to rise even further, because of the profit booking, it closed at a value of almost around 49,000 points. See, a rated concept of profit booking is the VIX index. This also stands for Volatility Index. It is published by the National Stock Exchange and it is limited to the NSE. The VIX index basically measures the degree of volatility in Nifty over the next 30 days. So, if the VIX index increases, it means we may see a greater amount of volatility in the Nifty over the next 30 days. On the other hand, if the VIX index is lower, then we would see a less amount of volatility in the Nifty over the next 30 days. Now, this interpretation of VIX index is quite important because if the VIX index is lower, it means that there is less amount of volatility in the Nifty. Lower amount of volatility would be able to attract more amount of investors because the market as such would be more stable. On the other hand, if the VIX index is higher, the higher market volatility will not be able to attract the investors. So there is a negative correlation between Nifty and the VIX index. As the VIX index increases, Nifty would reduce. On the other hand, if the VIX index reduces, Nifty would increase. So this is what you have to know as far as this particular article is concerned. Now coming to the question for the day, the answer for the question for the day that was asked in yesterday's DNS is option C.